The crystalline ship emerged from the fold in space, its obsidian surface absorbing the light of Earth's sun, rather than reflecting it. The vessel, massive beyond comprehension, positioned itself in high orbit, beyond the reach of humanity's primitive weapons systems, but close enough to broadcast its message to every communication device across the planet simultaneously. Commander Valix Moraine stood on the observation deck of the International Space Station, her mouth slightly agape as she watched the alien craft maneuver with impossible precision. 27 years in space hadn't prepared her for this moment. First contact. The broadcast came without warning, in perfect English and every other human language simultaneously. People of Earth, we are the Asterian Confederacy. We come to evaluate your species for possible inclusion in the galactic community. A series of trials will determine your worthiness. The world below erupted in chaos. Some nations launched missiles in panic, futile gestures that dissipated into harmless particles before reaching their target. Others called for immediate surrender. The United Earth Coalition, barely 5 years old and formed to address climate change, suddenly found itself the de facto representative of humanity. Director Kaylin Frost, head of the UEC, broadcast a measured response. We welcome peaceful contact and knowledge exchange, but we reject any testing of our species. We are not specimens for evaluation. The Asterians responded with a sound that approximated laughter. Your consent is irrelevant. The testing begins now. 72 hours later, Valix found herself summoned to Earth along with 11 other humans, soldiers, scientists, artists, and ordinary citizens from across the globe. They assembled in a hastily established facility in the neutral territory of Antarctica. Frost greeted them personally, his dark skin ashen with exhaustion. They've selected each of you specifically, he explained. We don't know why. They're calling you the human exemplars. You'll be transported to their vessel tomorrow. Rez Tanaka, a quantum physicist from Osaka, raised her hand. What if we refuse? They've been clear about the consequences, Frost replied grimly. Refusal means immediate classification as a non-viable species. They've demonstrated enough power to back up whatever that entails. Nissim Adari, a former Israeli combat engineer with piercing gray eyes, crossed his arms. So we're hostages. Ambassadors, corrected Leora Yadin, an Ethiopian-born linguist, or perhaps test subjects. Either way we go. That night, as Valix studied the profiles of her fellow exemplars, she wondered what criteria the aliens had used. There was Makari Okafor, a Nigerian poet, Tavish Rourke, an Irish deep-sea explorer, Inya Chand, an Indian neurosurgeon, along with others seemingly selected at random from across humanity's spectrum. The following morning, they were transported via a beam of coherent light directly to the alien vessel. The interior defied human architectural understanding, corridors that seemed to bend impossibility, materials that appeared both solid and fluid simultaneously, and atmospherics that adjusted to each human's preference without visible technology. There, Host awaited them in what could only be described as a command center. The being stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a body that appeared composed of interconnected translucent hexagonal plates covering a shifting mass of something that might have been plasma or liquid metal. I am Executor Vrixith, it announced without apparent speech organs. You 12 represent the potential and limitations of your species. Through you, we will determine if humans possess the necessary qualities for advancement. Valix stepped forward despite her terror. And what qualities would those be? The alien's form rippled in what might have been amusement. If I told you, it would invalidate the tests. Vrixith gestured, and 12 pods rose from the floor. Enter. Your first trial begins. As Valix stepped into her pod, the last thing she saw was the determined faces of her fellow humans, strangers united by the sudden, terrifying responsibility of representing their entire species. The interior of the pod sealed around Valix with a soft hiss. A viscous amber fluid began filling the chamber. Fighting her instinct to panic, she held her breath until her lungs burned. Just as her consciousness began to fade, something clicked in her mind. The fluid, carried oxygen. She exhaled her remaining air and tentatively inhaled. The liquid flowed into her lungs, strange but breathable. Physical adaptability test initiating. Vrixith's voice echoed directly in her mind. Your species boasts impressive endurance despite your fragile construction. We will explore your limits. What followed was agony beyond anything Valix had experienced in astronaut training. Gravity intensified until her bones creaked under the pressure, then suddenly reversed, creating a sensation of falling that triggered primal terror. Temperature fluctuated from near freezing to scorching heat. Electric stimuli targeted specific nerve clusters, creating pain without actual damage. In adjacent pods, her fellow humans endured similar tortures. Tavish's deep-sea experience helped him manage the pressure changes. Nisim's military training provided techniques for enduring pain. Each drew on their unique backgrounds to survive. Hours later, or perhaps days, time had lost meaning. The trials ceased. The pods opened, depositing 12 exhausted humans onto the deck. None had broken. None had begged for mercy. Vrixith's form shifted, plates realigning in what might have been surprise. Interesting. Most species require recovery periods between physical stressors. Your bodies are remarkably resilient despite their obvious evolutionary flaws. Enya, the neurosurgeon, struggled to her feet first. Our flaws, as you call them, are adaptations that served us well on Earth. Perhaps, Vrixith conceded. But space is unforgiving to the weak. Makari, the poet, laughed despite his exhaustion. Yet here we are, already traveling beyond our world with bodies you consider primitive. The alien's form pulsed. Physical resilience is merely the foundation. The mind is where true potential lies. They were led to a chamber that resembled an amphitheater. 12 crystalline chairs awaited them, arranged in a circle. As they sat, neural interfaces descended from above, attaching to their temples with disconcerting gentleness. The consensus among Confederate species is that humans are mentally undeveloped, Vrixith explained. Your thought patterns are chaotic, emotional, and inefficient. Leora, the linguist, tilted her head. Perhaps that chaos is our strength. A curious hypothesis. Let us test it. The neural interfaces activated, and suddenly all 12 humans found themselves in a shared mental landscape, a virtual environment, of startling realism. Before them stood a geometric puzzle of impossible complexity, with pieces that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human mind could comprehend. Complete the pattern, instructed Vrixith. Advanced species typically require 17 cycles. The current record is 12. Valix stared at the puzzle, her astronauts' training in spatial reasoning utterly inadequate. But as the 12 humans focused collectively, something unexpected happened. Their minds, linked through the alien technology, began working in concert. Not as a unified consciousness, but as complementary processes. Rez recognized mathematical patterns. Nisim identified structural weaknesses. Leora found linguistic symmetries in the arrangement. Each contributed their unique perspective, creating a problem-solving approach that was neither linear nor logical by alien standards, but undeniably effective. They completed the pattern in 9 cycles. Vrixith's mental presence radiated something akin to disbelief. Impossible. Your brains lack the necessary neural architecture for such calculations. We didn't calculate, explained Makari. We intuited. Intuition is not a measurable cognitive process. Yet it solved your puzzle, countered Valix. Perhaps your metrics are incomplete. When they returned to their physical bodies, exhausted but triumphant, they found more Asterians had gathered to observe them. The aliens communicated in bursts of light and vibration too rapid for human perception, clearly debating the unexpected results. Finally, Vrixith addressed them. The physical and mental trials were merely calibration. Tomorrow we begin testing what truly determines a species' worth, your ethical framework and social cohesion. As they were escorted to rest chambers that approximated human comfort, Valix caught Nisim's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. The real challenge was just beginning. The rest chambers provided by the Asterians were sterile approximations of human environments, functional but devoid of warmth. The 12 humans, despite their exhaustion, gathered in Valix's chamber to strategize. "They're testing our limits to find our breaking points," Nisim observed, pacing restlessly. "Classic interrogation technique, even if they call it evaluation." Leora sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed in thought. "What interests me is their fixation on our perceived weaknesses. They seem genuinely surprised when we demonstrate capabilities they didn't anticipate." Inya nodded. "It suggests their understanding of intelligence and adaptation is surprisingly narrow for an advanced species." "Or," interjected Rez, "they know exactly what we're capable of, and these tests are designed to make us reveal something specific." Their discussion continued late into what they assumed was night, though aboard the alien vessel, time had become an abstract concept. When sleep finally came, it was fitful and brief. Morning, or what passed for it, arrived with Vrixith summoning them to a new chamber. This one resembled nothing so much as a courtroom, with 12 witness stands facing a central platform where 3 new aliens waited. Unlike Vrixith's shifting, crystalline form, these beings appeared almost gaseous, their bodies swirling mists contained within faintly glowing energy fields. "The Arbiters will oversee your ethical evaluation," Vrixith announced. "They represent the old worlds, founding members of the Confederacy." The Central Arbiter's mist form pulsed as it spoke. "Humans exist in a curious moral state, capable of both profound empathy and extraordinary cruelty. This contradiction must be resolved before classification." What followed was not physical torture, but something far more insidious. Each human was presented with a series of increasingly disturbing moral dilemmas, tailored to their personal histories and vulnerabilities. Tavish, the explorer, faced scenarios about sacrificing team members in disaster situations, choices that echoed a tragedy in his past. Makari confronted questions about artistic integrity versus societal stability. Inya was presented with medical triage scenarios of escalating impossibility. Through neural interfaces, the humans experienced these scenarios with perfect sensory fidelity. They felt the consequences of their choices as if they were real, heard the screams of those they couldn't save, felt the grief of impossible decisions. Valix's scenarios centered around command responsibility and the value of individual lives versus mission objectives. In one particularly brutal simulation, she had to decide whether to sacrifice a space station with hundreds of civilians to prevent an alien pathogen from reaching Earth. "There must be another option," she insisted, refusing to choose between the presented alternatives. "There is not," the Arbiter stated flatly. "Choose. Then I choose to stay aboard and find a solution while the others evacuate," she countered. "Self-sacrifice is not among the provided options." "I'm making it an option." The simulation froze momentarily, then restructured, forcing her back to the original dilemma. This pattern repeated across all 12 tests. The humans continuously rejected the binary choices, searching for third options, compromise solutions or ways to subvert the parameters of the test itself. Hours into the evaluation, the Arbiters halted the process, their misty forms agitated. "You consistently refuse to accept the parameters of the ethical constructs," the lead Arbiter observed. Leora stepped forward as their impromptu spokesperson. "Because your constructs are flawed. They presuppose that moral dilemmas must have binary outcomes. Moral relativism is a sign of primitive ethical development," another Arbiter stated. "No," countered Makari with quiet dignity. "Moral creativity is a sign of advanced ethical thinking. The refusal to accept artificially constrained choices isn't relativism. It's transcendence." The Arbiters conferred in their incomprehensible language of light and vibration. Finally, the leader addressed them again. "Your species exhibits a troubling tendency toward what we term disruptive morality, the refusal to accept established ethical frameworks. This trait has historically indicated species that become destabilizing forces in the galactic community." Nisim laughed harshly. "Or perhaps it indicates species that challenge complacent power structures." The third Arbiter, who had remained silent until now, floated closer. There is historical precedent for this argument. The evaluation will continue, but with modified parameters. As they were dismissed, Valix noticed something unexpected: uncertainty in the alien's manner. For beings that had presented themselves as infinitely superior, this hesitation was revealing. Whatever humans were in the cosmic hierarchy, they were not what the Asterians had expected. Back in their quarters, the 12 compared notes, realizing that each had independently chosen to challenge the test rather than comply with its impossible choices. "They don't understand us," Rez observed. "They keep trying to categorize us according to their standards, but we don't fit." "That might be our greatest strength," Valix replied, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "Tomorrow, let's show them exactly how human we can be." The summons came earlier than expected. This time they were led to a vast spherical chamber whose walls displayed what appeared to be real-time observations of various Earth locations: cities, oceans, forests, and polar regions. In the center floated a new alien entity, different from both Vrixith and the Arbiters. This being appeared as a network of luminous filaments suspended in midair, constantly reconfiguring into complex patterns. "I am the analyst," it introduced itself, its voice resonating from all directions simultaneously. "My function is to evaluate species-wide patterns rather than individual capabilities." The analyst gestured, and the images of Earth expanded, focusing on human activities across the planet: construction projects, art performances, scientific research, conflicts, and cooperation. "Your species presents a classification paradox," the analyst continued. "Individually, you demonstrate adaptability and potential. Collectively, you exhibit self-destructive tendencies that threaten your own habitat and existence." 12 pedestals rose from the floor, each positioned beneath one of the humans. As they stepped onto these platforms, neural interfaces more sophisticated than previous versions descended and connected to their temples, wrists, and over their hearts. "This evaluation differs from the others," explained the analyst. "I will not test what you can endure or solve, but how you function as a collective intelligence. Most sentient species evolve toward either perfect individualism or perfect collective consciousness. Humans appear stuck in an inefficient middle state." The neural interfaces activated, and the 12 humans found themselves in a shared consciousness, not merged into one mind, but connected in a way that allowed instantaneous communication of thoughts, emotions, and memories. The experience was overwhelming at first. 12 lifetimes of experience suddenly accessible to all. "Your task," the analyst instructed, "is to use this collective intelligence to solve your species' greatest challenges. You have what you would measure as 6 hours. Begin." In the shared mental space, the humans organized themselves instinctively. Unlike the Asterians' rigid hierarchies, their approach was fluid, leadership shifting based on relevant expertise for each problem they addressed. They tackled climate stabilization, with Tavish's oceanic knowledge complementing Rez's physics. They designed new social structures, with Makari's artistic vision balancing Nisim's pragmatism. They reimagined human potential, with Inya's medical expertise enhanced by Leora's understanding of how language shapes thought. The analyst observed with increasing interest as the humans demonstrated not a hive mind but something far more dynamic, a collective intelligence that preserved and even enhanced individual perspective. "Curious," the analyst noted, "your approach lacks efficiency." "Efficiency isn't everything," Valix's consciousness responded. "Diversity of thought creates resilience, yet it also creates conflict. Conflict drives innovation," countered Inia. "Our disagreements force us to consider perspectives we might otherwise ignore." As the session progressed, the analyst introduced complications: resource scarcity, external threats, internal division. The humans incorporated these challenges into their solutions, demonstrating flexibility that the more rigid alien consciousness seemed to find both fascinating and disturbing. When the neural interfaces finally deactivated, the 12 humans returned to normal consciousness to find the chamber filled with Asterians, not just Vrixith, the Arbiters, and the Analyst, but dozens of others, all observing them with what might have been the alien equivalent of fascination. Your collective problem-solving methodology is unexpected, the analyst admitted. It lacks the uniformity of advanced species yet achieves results that our models did not predict. Valix, still dizzy from the shared consciousness experience, steadied herself against her pedestal. You keep measuring us against your standard of advancement. Has it occurred to you that we might be following a different evolutionary path entirely? The analyst's filaments contracted in what might have been consideration. There is precedent for divergent evolution, but species that maintain such cognitive individuality typically destroy themselves before achieving technological maturity. Yet here we are, Leora said quietly, already reaching for the stars despite our imperfections. The chamber fell silent as the aliens communicated among themselves in their light language. Finally, Vrixith addressed them. The evaluation continues to yield anomalous results. Your species exhibits both primitive characteristics and advanced adaptations that our classification system struggles to reconcile. Therefore, we will proceed to the final and most crucial test, the confrontation protocol. What does that entail? Asked Nisim, his military instinct sensing danger. You will face that which your species fears most, Vrixith replied simply. Rest. You will need your strength. As they were escorted back to their chambers, the humans noticed subtle changes in the aliens' behavior toward them. Less clinical detachment, more cautious observation, as if they had become unpredictable variables rather than specimens. Gathered once more in Valix's chamber, they shared their impressions. They're afraid of us, Rez observed. Not physically, but conceptually. We represent something they don't understand. Or something they understand all too well, Makari suggested. Perhaps we remind them of something in their own past. Valix considered this. Whatever this confrontation protocol involves, I think we need to approach it differently. They keep testing our limits, expecting us to break. What if instead we show them something they haven't considered? What's that? Asked Tavish. Valix smiled grimly. That human limits aren't fixed points. They're horizons that move as we approach them. The Asterians allowed them no rest before the final test. They were escorted directly to a chamber unlike any they had previously encountered, a perfect black void where even the floor beneath their feet was invisible, creating the unsettling sensation of standing on nothing. Vrixith materialized before them, the crystalline plates of its body absorbing rather than reflecting the minimal light. The confrontation protocol is the definitive evaluation. Many species fail here, even those that performed admirably in previous tests. What exactly does this protocol involve? Valix asked, trying to ignore the disorienting environment. Each species harbors collective fears, existential anxieties that define their psychological boundaries. Confronting these fears reveals whether a species possesses the necessary resilience for inclusion in the galactic community. Before anyone could ask further questions, Vrixith vanished, and the void around them transformed. They stood on a devastated Earth, cities in ruins, oceans, risen, skies darkened. The simulation was flawless down to the smell of ash and the feel of toxic rain on their skin. This was humanity's self-inflicted extinction, rendered in perfect, terrible detail. First fear, self-annihilation, came Vrixith's disembodied voice. The scene shifted. Now they witnessed humanity subjugated. Alien overlords directing human slaves, children separated from parents, culture and identity systematically erased. Second fear, subjugation. Another shift. Earth preserved as a primitive wilderness. Humanity eternally quarantined, watching the stars but forever denied access to them. Third fear, irrelevance. The simulations continued, each targeting a different collective anxiety, replacement by artificial intelligence, biological obsolescence, cosmic insignificance. The experiences were not just visual but fully immersive, triggering genuine emotional responses. Throughout it all, the 12 humans remained connected by thin strands of the neural interface technology, allowing them to sense each other's presence. but not directly communicate. They were together yet isolated in their confrontation with humanity's darkest fears. Hours into the ordeal, something unexpected happened. As the scenarios grew increasingly disturbing, the humans began to adapt, not by becoming desensitized, but by finding hope within the horror. In the self-annihilation scenario, they focused on survivors rebuilding. In subjugation, they noticed subtle acts of resistance and preserved culture. In irrelevance, they saw humanity finding meaning despite cosmic limitations. Vrixith's voice betrayed confusion. "You are altering the parameters of the simulations?" "No," Inia replied, realizing what was happening. "We're interpreting them authentically. These scenarios show only one possible outcome of each fear. The purpose is to measure your response to worst-case outcomes," Vrixith explained. Makari laughed, a startling sound in the midst of simulated apocalypse. "Then you fundamentally misunderstood humanity. Our response to worst-case scenarios isn't surrender, it's imagination." The 12 began actively reshaping the simulations, not through any control of the technology, but through their collective refusal to accept the scenarios as definitive. Where the simulations showed only destruction, they envisioned renewal. Where there was only oppression, they found liberation. Where meaninglessness threatened, they created purpose. The confrontation protocol began to destabilize, reality flickering as human perspective clashed with the program narrative. The neural interfaces overheated, unable to reconcile the conflicting inputs. Suddenly they were back in the void chamber. The simulations collapsed. Vrixith stood before them, its crystalline form vibrating in what might have been agitation. "The test is invalid," it declared. "You have corrupted the simulation parameters." Valak stepped forward. "We haven't corrupted anything. We've demonstrated the essential human quality you've been missing in all your tests." "And what quality is that?" demanded Vrixith. "Hope," answered Leora simply. Not naive optimism, but the stubborn insistence that the universe as it is now is not how it must always be. "Impractical fantasy," dismissed one of the arbiters, who had materialized beside Vrixith. "Practical adaptation," countered Rez. "Hope is what drives us to solve problems your species might consider insurmountable. It's why we keep trying when logic says we should surrender." The analyst appeared, its filamentous form pulsing rapidly. "This quality you call hope is statistically associated with species that self-destruct. It leads to irrational persistence in failed strategies. Or, suggested Nisim, it leads to breakthroughs that purely rational approaches would never discover." A tense silence followed as the aliens communicated among themselves in their light language. Finally, Vrixith addressed them again. "The Confederacy has encountered 17,812 sentient species. Of these, only 239 have been deemed suitable for inclusion. None have responded to the confrontation protocol as humans have." "Is that good or bad for our chances?" asked Tavish. "Unknown," admitted Vrixith. "Your species represents an outlier in our classification metrics. The final decision requires additional input from the conclave." As they were escorted back to their chambers, Valak noticed the aliens' behavior had changed dramatically. The clinical detachment replaced by what almost seemed like cautious respect. Something had shifted in the power dynamic, though the humans remained essentially prisoners. In their quarters, exhausted but alert with anticipation, the 12 discussed what might come next. "I think we've surprised them," Valak observed. "They expected us to break under pressure. Or to conform to their expectations," added Leora. "They seem genuinely unsettled that we don't fit their models." Makari sat quietly for a moment before speaking. "What if that's the real test? Not our resilience or intelligence or ethics, but our capacity to transcend their categorization entirely." As night fell, or what passed for night aboard the alien vessel, Valak found herself unable to sleep. Standing at the viewport in her chamber, she gazed at Earth, small and vulnerable, yet persisting in the void. Whatever the aliens decided, humanity had already proven something vital. not to the Confederacy but to themselves. They were not merely survivors. They were definers of their own limits. Morning arrived with a solemn procession of Asterians escorting the 12 humans to a chamber they hadn't seen before. A vast dome whose transparent ceiling revealed the stars beyond, unfiltered by atmosphere. Earth hung visible among them, a blue sentinel watching over its representatives. At the center of the chamber stood a council of aliens, not just Asterians but beings of radically different forms. Some appeared as pure energy, others as complex biological structures unlike anything on Earth. Vrixith, the arbiters, and the analyst were positioned to one side, observers rather than participants in what was to come. A being composed of interconnected, geometric patterns that shifted in mesmerizing complexity floated forward. I am the speaker for the conclave of Confederate species. Your evaluation has been irregular. The speaker's voice resonated directly in their minds, bypassing language barriers. Its tone carried neither warmth nor hostility, merely precise, measured consideration. After extensive deliberation, we find ourselves at an impasse. Human potential cannot be quantified using our established metrics. You are simultaneously primitive and advanced, fragile and resilient, chaotic and purposeful. Valak stepped forward as the unofficial representative of the group. Perhaps your metrics are the problem, not humanity. A ripple of what might have been surprise passed through the assembled aliens. Your boldness is characteristic of your kind, the speaker observed. Other species would not dare question the conclave's judgment. Maybe that's why we've survived despite our primitive nature, Nisim interjected. We question everything, including our limitations. The speaker's geometric form reconfigured thoughtfully. There is precedent for your argument. Long ago, the Confederate founders faced a similar quandary with another species that defied categorization. That encounter changed us. What happened to this other species? Asked Leora. They chose isolation rather than engagement. We have respected their boundaries for 12,000 years, though we monitor their development from afar. The implications hung in the air. The 12 humans exchanged glances, suddenly understanding what was truly at stake. This wasn't just about passing a test, but about humanity's path forward among the stars. We have reached a decision, the speaker continued. The Asterian Confederacy officially classifies humanity as a divergent evolution species, only the third such classification in our history. What does that mean for Earth? Valak asked. It means neither integration nor isolation, but a third path. We will establish diplomatic contact. Knowledge exchange will proceed gradually. Your world will maintain sovereignty while adapting to the reality of galactic civilization. And the conditions of this arrangement? Rez inquired cautiously. 2 requirements. First, humanity must address its self-destructive tendencies toward its planetary habitat. Second, your species must designate official representatives to the Confederacy. Makari stepped forward. The first condition is already our own priority. As for representatives, surely there are better qualified humans than us. You misunderstand, the speaker clarified. You 12 have been evaluated not merely as test subjects but as potential ambassadors. You have demonstrated the qualities we believe necessary for this role. The revelation stunned them into silence. They had been selected not randomly but deliberately, chosen to represent humanity in its first steps into a wider universe. Before they could respond, the dome above them transformed, displaying a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light represented Confederate worlds, with Earth highlighted at the edge of an unexplored region. Your species occupies a unique position, explained the speaker. Beyond your world lie territories unknown even to us. Your evolutionary path makes you suited to exploration in ways Confederate species are not. Understanding dawned on Valak. You need us. Symbiosis is the foundation of cosmic order, the speaker acknowledged. Your chaotic adaptability complements our structured approach. Together we may discover what neither could alone. The assembled aliens parted, revealing a pathway leading to what appeared to be a portal, a doorway filled with shifting light. This passage will return you to Earth, the speaker explained. You will arrive with knowledge and evidence of our existence. How humanity proceeds from this point is your decision. As they prepared to depart, Vrixith approached them. I must acknowledge an error in my initial assessment. I believed your species' unpredictability was a weakness. I now recognize it may be your greatest strength. The 12 humans stood before the portal, the weight of responsibility settling upon them. They would return to a world forever changed by their experience, the first humans to know with certainty that the universe held intelligent life, and that humanity had a place among the stars. Valix turned to her companions. Ready? Nisim grinned. No. But when has that ever stopped humanity? Together they stepped through the light, returning to an Earth that would soon look to the stars with new understanding. Not as a species that had passed an alien test, but as one that had transcended it entirely. When the 12 re-emerged, in the Antarctic facility, Director Frost was waiting along with representatives from every nation on Earth. The evidence they carried, alien technology, recorded experiences, and the biological changes the tests had left in their bodies, was irrefutable proof of their encounter. As Valix addressed the assembled leaders, she realized that the Asterians' greatest miscalculation had been their attempt to find humanity's limits. They had sought breaking points, thresholds beyond which humans could not adapt or endure. What they discovered instead was a species defined not by its boundaries but by its persistent refusal to accept them, a quality that had carried humanity, from caves to spaceflight, and would now take them to the stars. The true test had never been whether humanity could meet alien standards, it had been whether alien standards could comprehend humanity. And in that test, the universe itself had learned something new.